Did one risky move by a Chinese fighter jet nearly ignite a global conflict? On April 24, 2025, a Chinese J-16 flew dangerously close to the USS William P. an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, during its transit through the Taiwan Strait. This was not just a breach of protocol. It raised urgent questions about intent and escalation at one of the world's most contested maritime frontiers. What was the J-16's objective in approaching so closely? And how did the U.S. Navy's advanced Aegis combat system factor into the response? Today, we break down the critical moments of this encounter, exploring the technical capabilities and strategic calculations behind each move. On April 24, 2025, the USS William P. an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, was executing a freedom of navigation operation through the Taiwan Strait. The mission was to assert the right of passage in international waters, directly challenging China's sweeping territorial claims. The Lawrence ran dark to commercial sensors, while satellites and subs tracked every move. This operation unfolded against a backdrop of heightened regional activity, with U.S.-Philippine military exercises occurring nearby and Beijing's forces on alert. The crew of the William P. maintained routine readiness as they moved westward. The ship's radar signature was kept low, and its automatic identification system beacon remained off, minimizing exposure. Overhead, real-time surveillance fed situational data to command centers. For much of the transit, the environment was tense but controlled, until a Chinese J-16 fighter jet appeared on radar, closing in with deliberate speed. The J-16's maneuver was not a standard intercept. It descended to a low altitude, flying far closer than standard military safety protocols would permit. The proximity was unmistakable, with the jet passing at a range that was visually unnerving for those on deck. U.S. Navy officials characterized the flyby as deliberate recklessness, a calculated move that left little room for error. In such close encounters, even a minor miscalculation could result in a physical collision or a rapid escalation into conflict. China's view of the Taiwan Strait is central to understanding the encounter. Beijing regards the strait as internal waters, a position at odds with international law and the U.S. stance that these are open seas. The presence of a U.S. destroyer conducting a freedom of navigation operation in these contested waters was not only a legal assertion, but a direct signal to China's leadership. In response, the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force sent the J-16 to make its presence unmistakable, transforming the operation into a high-stakes geopolitical standoff. The risks in such confrontations are not hypothetical. Military observers recall the 2001 incident near Hainan Island, when a Chinese J-8 fighter jet collided with a U.S. EP-3 reconnaissance plane. That event forced the American crew to make an emergency landing, while the Chinese pilot lost his life. The aftermath triggered a diplomatic crisis, serving as a stark reminder that these encounters can spiral out of control with little warning. The April 2025 incident carried similar dangers, as both sides operated within a narrow margin for error. Despite the provocation, the U.S. Navy's response was measured and disciplined. The William P. held its course and speed, resisting any impulse to maneuver evasively. Defensive systems on board were brought to full readiness. The ship's Aegis combat system tracked the J-16 continuously, while electronic countermeasures stood by to respond if necessary. The objective was clear: maintain presence and demonstrate resolve without escalating the situation further. China's reaction to the transit was swift and emphatic. The Eastern Theater Command publicly condemned the operation, framing it as a deliberate provocation and a threat to regional stability. State media amplified this message, accusing the U.S. of undermining peace and seeking confrontation. Behind these statements lies a broader strategy, using calculated risk to test U.S. resolve and reinforce China's domestic narrative of defiance against foreign pressure. For Washington, the passage of the William P. was part of a broader commitment to freedom of navigation, especially in regions where unilateral claims threaten the global order. The Taiwan Strait, however, carries added significance. It is not only a strategic waterway, but also a symbol of U.S. support for Taiwan and resistance to Chinese expansionism. The timing of the operation, coinciding with joint drills with the Philippines, amplified its message and its risks. This encounter was not isolated. It reflects a pattern of increasing military friction in the Indo-Pacific, where Chinese forces test boundaries and U.S. units respond with restraint. Such moments place immense pressure on crews, who must balance operational discipline with the ever-present risk of escalation. The April 2025 flyby in the Taiwan Strait stands as a stark example of how advanced platforms and calculated maneuvers can turn routine operations into potential flashpoints. The J-16's actions were not only technically sophisticated, but also symbolically charged, raising new questions about the tools and tactics China employs to assert its claims. The J-16 stands at the center of China's approach to military signaling in contested airspace. As a multi-role fighter, it is engineered for both air superiority and precision strikes, serving as a flexible asset in China's expanding arsenal. The aircraft's design incorporates significant modifications over earlier models, focusing on advanced electronics, weapons integration, and survivability to meet the demands of modern conflict. Its presence near U.S. and allied forces is rarely accidental. Each appearance is calculated to demonstrate both technical capability and strategic resolve. A defining feature of the J-16 is its active electronically scanned array, AESA radar system. This technology allows the jet to detect and track multiple targets simultaneously, even in the presence of electronic countermeasures. The AESA's resilience to jamming and its long-range detection capabilities provide the J-16 with a decisive edge in complex environments. Coupled with this radar system is the jet's versatile missile loadout, the PL-15 air-to-air missile, with a range exceeding 200 kilometers, enables the J-16 to engage adversaries well before they can threaten it in return. For maritime strike missions, the YJ-12 anti-ship missile offers a speed of up to Mach 4, making it a formidable threat to surface vessels and complicating defensive calculations for any ship in its path. In addition to its offensive capabilities, the J-16 incorporates stealth-like features to reduce its radar cross-section. The use of radar-absorbent materials and subtle shaping modifications enhance its ability to approach targets undetected, particularly during the initial phases of an encounter. While not a true stealth platform, these enhancements make it more difficult for adversary sensors to acquire and track the aircraft, especially in the crowded and electronically contested environment of the Taiwan Strait. The April 2025 incident near the USS William P. Lawrence is a clear example of how the J-16 is used as a tool of proximity intimidation. The jet approached the destroyer at a distance that left little margin for error, flying close enough to test the ship's defensive posture and the discipline of its crew. The Aegis combat system aboard the Lawrence, designed to detect and respond to aerial threats, was forced to track the J-16 at close range, raising the stakes of the encounter. For the Chinese pilot, such maneuvers are not merely demonstrations of flying skill, but calculated acts intended to probe U.S. responses and reinforce China's claim over contested waters. This pattern of behavior is not unique to the April incident. The J-16 has played a prominent role in several recent high-stakes encounters. In June 2022, a Chinese J-16 intercepted an Australian P-8 Poseidon maritime surveillance aircraft over the South China Sea. During that encounter, the J-16 released metallic chaff, used to confuse radar systems, some of which was ingested by the Poseidon's engine, creating a serious flight hazard. Similarly, in February 2023, a J-11 fighter jet, a predecessor to the J-16, flew within 20 feet of a U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance plane, forcing the American crew to take evasive action. These incidents reflect a deliberate strategy, using close approaches and electronic warfare measures to challenge foreign aircraft and ships without crossing into open conflict. The J-16's actions embody China's broader use of gray zone tactics. These maneuvers operate below the threshold of armed conflict, but are designed to intimidate, complicate decision-making, and incrementally shift the status quo. By repeatedly flying dangerously close to foreign assets, the J-16 signals China's willingness to push boundaries and test the reactions of its rivals. The intent is clear: assert presence, demonstrate resolve, and force adversaries to either accept increased Chinese activity or risk escalation. Yet this approach carries significant risk. The margin for error in these encounters is narrow, and the potential for miscalculation is ever present. When a J-16 closes in on a vessel like the USS William P. Lawrence, both sides must rely on strict discipline and clear rules of engagement to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. The U.S. Navy's response to these provocations is shaped by a commitment to maintain stability while preparing for the possibility of escalation. Understanding the technical and strategic dimensions of the J-16's role is essential to grasping the dynamics of these high-tension standoffs. The next challenge lies in how the USS William P. Lawrence and its crew maintain control and composure when faced with such deliberate provocations. On board the USS William P. Lawrence, the crew operates in an environment where every second counts and every action is scrutinized. The destroyer's Aegis combat system forms the backbone of its defensive posture, integrating advanced radar, weapons, and command functions into a unified response network. When the Chinese J-16 closed in, the phased array radar locked onto the jet within milliseconds, tracking its flight path and feeding real-time data to the ship's command center. This rapid threat assessment is critical, allowing the crew to evaluate intent and calibrate their response without delay. As the J-16 initiated its aggressive flyby, the ship's electronic countermeasure suites were activated to detect any indication that the jet might attempt to lock on with targeting radar. This technical readiness is not merely a display of capability. It is a calculated step designed to deter escalation without provoking it. Weapon systems were brought to a heightened state of readiness, but the focus remained on preserving the mission and avoiding unnecessary confrontation. The destroyer's bridge team maintained a steady course, relying on established protocols and constant communication with higher command to ensure that every move was deliberate and measured. This approach is the product of rigorous training and strict adherence to pre-mission protocols. Sailors regularly participate in simulations that mirror the unpredictability and intensity of real-world encounters. These drills condition the crew to respond quickly, maintain composure, and make split-second decisions under pressure. The Navy's rules of engagement in the Taiwan Strait are designed to balance the need for security with the imperative to avoid unintended escalation. Every action on the bridge is governed by these rules, ensuring that the response to provocation is neither timid nor reckless. The incident with the J-16 is not an isolated event. In October 2018, the USS Decatur faced a similar test of resolve when a Chinese warship closed to within 45 yards during a freedom of navigation operation near the Spratly Islands. The Decatur's crew, like that of the William P. Lawrence, maintained their course and followed established procedures, demonstrating a pattern of professional restraint in the face of aggressive maneuvers. These encounters highlight the thin line between routine operations and crisis, where the discipline of the crew and the clarity of their orders can determine the outcome. The professionalism displayed by the crew of the William P. Lawrence is more than a function of technical competence. It reflects a culture of preparation, where each sailor understands the gravity of their responsibilities. Whether operating sensors, managing electronic defenses, or overseeing weapons readiness, every role is interconnected. The destroyer's ability to maintain control under pressure is a direct result of this coordinated effort, where training, technology, and protocol converge to manage risk and preserve operational objectives. Throughout the encounter, the ship maintained constant communication with theater command and intelligence assets. Satellite feeds and regional surveillance provided a broader operational picture, supporting the crew's situational awareness and informing decisions as the J-16 maneuvered nearby. This networked approach ensures that the actions of a single vessel are aligned with the broader strategic posture of U.S. forces in the region. Each freedom of navigation operation in the Taiwan Strait is a deliberate assertion of international law and a challenge to unilateral territorial claims. The actions of the William P. Lawrence during the April 2025 incident were carefully calibrated to avoid unnecessary escalation while signaling resolve. By adhering to established procedures and maintaining a disciplined response, the crew demonstrated the Navy's commitment to upholding the rules-based order without compromising regional stability. The frequency of these encounters is increasing, placing greater demands on the professionalism and readiness of U.S. naval forces. Every close call is a test of both technology and human judgment, and the ability to manage these risks without undermining mission objectives remains central to U.S. strategy in contested waters. As these standoffs become more common, the implications extend far beyond the immediate tactical environment, pointing to broader questions about power, deterrence, and the evolving balance in the Indo-Pacific. The ongoing contest between the United States and China in the Indo-Pacific is defined by a series of high-stakes encounters and persistent strategic maneuvering. The April 24, 2025 incident involving the USS William P. Lawrence and a Chinese J-16 fighter jet is emblematic of these tensions, reflecting a broader struggle for influence and control across the region. The Taiwan Strait serves as one of several flashpoints, but the underlying dynamics extend into the South China Sea, a critical waterway at the center of global commerce and security. The South China Sea covers approximately 1.4 million square miles and is a vital artery for international trade. Roughly one-third of all maritime shipping passes through its waters each year, carrying goods, energy resources, and raw materials that sustain economies around the world. The region's strategic value is heightened by its abundance of oil, natural gas, and fisheries, resources that are increasingly contested as regional powers seek to secure their interests. China's expansive claims, marked by the 9-dash line, assert control over nearly 90% of the South China Sea, overlapping with the exclusive economic zones of several Southeast Asian states, most notably the Philippines and Vietnam. These claims far exceed the limits set by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, prompting widespread opposition and legal challenges. The United States, while not a claimant in the South China Sea disputes, maintains a strong interest in upholding freedom of navigation and the international rules-based order. U.S. Navy freedom of navigation operations. FONOPs play a central role in this strategy. Warships such as the USS William P. routinely transit contested waters, including within 12 nautical miles of Chinese-controlled features in the Spratly Islands, to challenge what Washington identifies as excessive maritime claims. These operations are not isolated to one region. They form part of a global pattern, with similar FONOPs conducted in the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and other strategically sensitive areas. The intent is clear: to assert the rights of all nations to freely navigate international waters in accordance with international law, and to counter unilateral attempts to alter the status quo. For Beijing, these U.S. operations represent direct challenges to its sovereignty and national security. Each transit by a U.S. warship is framed as a provocation, prompting strong diplomatic protests and, increasingly, military responses. China's approach extends beyond reactive measures. The rapid construction and militarization of artificial islands, complete with airstrips, missile batteries, and radar installations, has fundamentally altered the strategic landscape. These fortified outposts enable the People's Liberation Army to project power far from the mainland and to monitor, if not control, the flow of maritime traffic through the region. The U.S. and its allies, including the Philippines and Japan, have repeatedly called for an end to these activities, arguing that they violate both the spirit and the letter of the 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. The frequency and intensity of close encounters between U.S. and Chinese forces have increased markedly over the past decade. Between 2016 and 2023, there were more than 180 documented incidents involving unsafe or unprofessional maneuvers by Chinese aircraft and vessels near U.S. military assets in the Indo-Pacific. These actions are viewed in Washington as deliberate efforts to test U.S. resolve, raise the risks of routine operations, and deter further challenges to China's claims. The 2001 collision between a Chinese J-8 fighter and a U.S. EP-3 surveillance plane near Hainan Island remains a stark reminder of how quickly such encounters can escalate. The resulting diplomatic crisis underscored the dangers inherent in operating in contested airspace and the importance of clear protocols and disciplined conduct. Regional allies and partners are integral to the evolving balance of power. The Philippines, bound to the United States by a mutual defense treaty, faces regular incursions by Chinese vessels into its claimed waters. Japan, likewise, confronts mounting pressure from Chinese and Russian naval activity near its territory. These nations have deepened security cooperation with the United States, not only to protect their own interests, but to reinforce a broader coalition committed to stability and the rule of law in the Indo-Pacific. Their involvement raises the stakes, increasing the risk that a localized incident could trigger a wider crisis. Underlying these developments is a fundamental disagreement over the interpretation and application of international law. The United States advocates for adherence to UNCLOS and the principle of open access to the world's oceans, while China asserts historical rights that extend well beyond accepted legal boundaries. This clash of perspectives shapes every encounter, from routine patrols to the most dangerous standoffs. The April 2025 encounter in the Taiwan Strait is a product of this environment. a calculated move by both sides within a framework of persistent competition. As military modernization accelerates and regional partnerships deepen, the potential for miscalculation remains ever present. Each incident, no matter how contained, serves as a reminder of the volatility that defines the Indo-Pacific today. The April 24, 2025, encounter between the USS William P. and a Chinese J-16 fighter jet stands as a critical marker of intensifying risk in the Indo-Pacific. The Taiwan Strait operates as a stage for modern deterrence, where each maneuver tests the boundaries of restraint and readiness. With encounters up 180% in recent years, what happens when restraint fails and a single incident triggers a wider crisis? If you value in-depth military analysis, subscribe now. Your next frontline briefing awaits. Share your perspective below. How should U.S. rules of engagement adapt in the face of China's evolving gray zone tactics?